Vanity of vanities, and all is vanity, the Koheleth, the teacher in Ecclesiastes, declares. An elusive character, the word Koheleth is translated as a teacher. The suggestion is it might more accurately be understood who's one who summons and speaks to a gathering. At the beginning of today's reading, Koheleth asserted that he might be a Davidic king, the author of this text, who ruled over Israel in Jerusalem. This is to intimate that he could be Solomon, and for many years it is believed this was a text of Solomon. But there is now sufficient scholarly doubt to suggest it is most likely a ruse to gain credibility for the text rather than a reality. Vanity of vanities, and all is vanity, is his catch cry. This too is vanity is the phrase we hear threaded through today's reading. Vanity, but perhaps not in the way we quite understand the word today. In its literal sense, it probably means a breath of wind, but it's used more metaphorically to suggest transience or uselessness or deceptiveness. There is a comparable phrase used in Hosea which suggests a pursuing of the wind to evoke the sense of frustration inherent in attempts to achieve the impossible. So seeking meaning, understanding, reason, and rationale for life and the experience of our human journey, is it a chasing after the wind? For whether you are rich or poor, whether you are good or evil, whether you understand yourself blessed or cursed, the sun shines, the rain falls, on each the same. We each come to life and we each die. Of this we are certain. The same fate befalls each of us. And much of life is toil. Life is hard, not relentlessly or mercilessly so, for there are times of joy and celebration and gladness. Yet for the large part, life can be experienced as plain, plodding persistence. So, we look back upon the trail of our life and seek to discern a pattern in it, to gain the sense that we, through life, have gained. We have grown. We have accumulated some measure of, what shall we say, wisdom? Some sense that we've had a purpose, that there is a meaning to the sum of it, to the sum of us. We attribute qualities to our achievements, to where we have come from where we began, as does the teacher of Ecclesiastes. That all our toil has merit because it has been done with wisdom and knowledge and skill. For longevity, that all our effort revealed in what we've produced and created and generated is rewarded when those it passes to also live this way, because then they honour the value and effort of our sincere, hard-wrought labour. We desire for the sum of our striving of our life to count for something somehow, to have our value affirmed, known, revealed in the sum of our parts, in what we've acquired through our striving labour, especially when we've lived righteously and honourably. And yet also and uneasily, we know that when we die, that all we have gained and amassed will pass from us to those who did not earn it. And we have no control and no way of knowing or determining the character of those who will gain from our toil. And again, we know uncomfortably that there are those who live amassing and gaining little or nothing, and who live perhaps dissolute and dishonourable lives under the same sky, the same sun, the same rain. They too have lived, they too will die, and their memory and the memory of us will also pass. Vanity of vanity and chasing the wind. How are we to live with this being so? How are we to live? Such echo of this resounds in our gospel today. Perhaps we're accustomed to hearing this parable as a remonstration against wealth, against the amassing of resources beyond our need, and that may well be part of the deal. Yet the focus seems to be more about the rich man's self-understanding, about the choices he makes based on his understanding of what secures him, of what tells him who he is, what bestows upon him value and worth. And the way the story is told, the rich man understands that he and his life are described, are valued, are known, and his life is successfully secured by the sum of his wealth. So yes, for sure, excessive wealth is part of the picture, but I think somewhat incidental, even as it is curiously telling. Wealth is a potent measure of success in our society, as doubtless it was in the time of Ecclesiastes. Wealth is something we can measure. In its varied forms, it is a resource for trading with in life. So in some ways, it's simply a convenience, a necessary convenience. However, it has also become a primary means by which we measure ourselves, by which we compare ourselves one to another. But let me ask you something. If you think of all the things you are rich in, the wealth that you may have amassed and acquired, the means of trade with which you have negotiated resource for your life, does it tell you who you are in the essence of yourself? I don't mean by this, I'm not talking about what you can do or how clever or intelligent or useful you are and how this is recognized through financial reward. Rather, what I mean is, does all this wealth remind and redirect you to consider the wondrous uniqueness of you? Your unique created being. Does it cause you to pause and notice this moment? Does it cause you to consider the immense, unlikely improbability of this creation that is, upon which you are delicately and utterly dependent, and not one bit of it is your doing? Has our most of the time toiling in life for wealth, and our all is vanity seeking for this toil to have purpose and meaning, has it caused us to think of ourselves as somehow a sum of a number of parts? Perhaps with careful attention we have pieced together, determined and created an intentioned life for ourselves. We have put together the component parts of what we discern and determine is a good life and one that fits us. And we stitch these parts together and know it as a whole. And there is nothing wrong with this. But I wonder, in doing so, has this stepped us away from remembering that we are each a uniquely created whole? Wholly, naturally fitted to take our place as participants in the life of the world, each inherently inclined to creative, life-bringing activity for the flourishing of life. Each one of us, of you, desired and loved into being, so that we can take our place to live intimate companions of the divine, and we can act in accord with this. As I thought of this, I was reminded of an account from real life that I read recently. There was a young Peace Corps volunteer who entered a small village to teach biology to the native children in Tanzania. After dissecting a frog one day and describing all the muscles and organs to the class so that they could understand a frog, he was confronted by a local elder who offered his way to understand the working of a frog. This local elder set loose a second frog, one that was destined for dissection, and he crouched down in frog-like position, and he began to move his head and his body in synchronicity with the frog. The native elder paused and looked around as the frog paused, and hopped as the frog hopped. The elder increasingly joined into the experience of frog with the frog, until the frog finally hopped off into the bush. After many minutes had passed in the becoming one with the frog, the elder described what he had felt happening in his body and mind, as if he were a frog. He reflected to the young volunteer that the young man understood the components of the frog, the muscles and its organs, while the elder understood the working of the frog, its froggy moves and idiosyncrasies as a unique frog in its species, surveyed in a given environment. He also added that the native way of knowing about the frog lived to produce more frogs. Neither way is a more right way to know, but each way leads to different knowings. In the dissection mode, the view of the world is more static and fixed. The world that gets sorted into components and parts tends to be interpreted in isolation from other elements. And it's great because it gains us knowledge about how things function, how the elements of something function. Whereas the being model sees the world as moving and changing, sees the world in a more related and interactive way. Neither way is a more right way to know, but each leads to different ways of knowing. Having said that, from a frog point of view, one way is definitely more right than the other. As we toil in life, we construct and stitch together meaningful lives. We identify, develop, and grow our capacities. We discern creative opportunities to contribute, to align with others. Depending on the context into which we're born, and perhaps also a fair dose of providence along the way, we may have chance to amass wealth. And we're tempted, in fact, we are encouraged to keep this wealth for ourselves. Easily and soon it can become a measure of our worth if we do not also hold the native elder's way of knowing. A way that invites us to step free from these things and to see them for what they are. That our wealth is not us, and it may be binding us. A faith religious perspective such as this one that we are in invites us to remember who we are, to learn to trust we can release that which binds us, and we can pause, and we can notice, and we can pay attention and become one with God. We can grow to understand the divine workings of God in the world as we look and see and seek for that. Each of us idiosyncratically, each of us as unique individuals in our particular context. We can choose to be rich towards God, generous, open-handed, giving of our abundance, honouring, so releasing the abundance of others. We can choose to not just store up treasures for ourselves.